Hello, welcome back. Alex Aaronson from Court Accountability Action here with my friend Tiffany Muller, the president of the powerhouse End Citizens United and Let America Vote. Tiffany is a political pro. You have been, active and effective for decades now, Tiffany, at the state level, at the local level, working for governors. You were an elected official uh, yourself at the local level, and you've been running this shop, this incredible anti-corruption, anti-money in politics shop, End Citizens United, since 2015. We got to know each other when I was Senate staffer for Senator Whitehouse. Obviously, he has a deep focus on getting corrupting dark money out of politics, and really always valued your insight, perspectives, the information you would bring us to help us think through the moments we were living through and the broader agenda we needed to be driving. And it's been such a pleasure and honor to work with you on the outside, as it were, as we think through how to fight through these really challenging times. So glad to have you here on Midas Touch Legal AF with Court Accountability Action, and would love to keep having you here as you keep driving and pushing the envelope in terms of some of this stuff. Today, we wanted to dig into some polling we did together with some other partners on corruption, on the court, on a bunch of other stuff, on DOGE, and which has really come to full fruition in this past week as the federal funding freeze has been kind of unleashed on America. And so I wanted to welcome you in here and get into some of these research findings. Tiffany, can you tell us about, kind of, before we actually get into the research findings themselves, you are like the consummate pro in understanding, public survey research and polling, and then conveying the messaging learnings to elected officials. What were we doing here? What were we trying to accomplish? What were we trying to learn and convey?
Well, first, thank you, Alex, for having me on. I can't wait to get into this great information. I do want to say that I might take a little offense at your decades quote. I think you're dating me a little bit here. It's not untrue. I just don't know that we need to put it out.
I've kind of been at this for decades now too. Just
It is.
kind of a lot.
Yeah, that
Gray
that
hair
really snuck up on me. That really snuck up on me. And look, you are doing such incredible work at Court Accountability, and we're always so thrilled to partner with you. And I can't wait to be back on Midas Touch Legal AF with you all many times in the future. So, look, we do polling basically to get a good read and a snapshot in time read on where voters are at and what they're thinking at any given point in time. And there's lots of different ways that you can go talk to voters. We can do focus groups where we actually bring together a group of voters and they talk to each other. In this one, we actually did a mix of both talking to people on the phone and talking to people through online, so that we could get a little bit better representative sample, and so that we could go into a little more deep dive on some of these issues, which are, DOGE itself is a concept that just not a lot of folks understand yet. And the reason we do this is, one, we want to know what voters are thinking. What are they hearing? What's breaking through? What isn't? But number two, what lessons can we learn from that, and what do we need to be messaging on? And then we use that to go talk to elected officials, to candidates, to other partner organizations. And, I think the results of this particular research project were really illuminating about how voters are still just really frustrated with the direction of the country. They really want change, but also they really don't like corruption in our government or big billionaires who are lining their own pockets, right? So there's a lot of good lessons and good opportunities for us to take away in this poll. So before we get into it, it was actually a sample of 1,300 people, which is a really big, sizable sample. We oversampled key segments of voters, including Black voters and Hispanic voters, to make sure that we really understood what different communities are thinking and what they're hearing. And we did this in battleground states. And that means the most competitive areas, the places with kind of the most competitive elections, both on the House side and the Senate side. And I'm a data geek, Alex. I love looking at polls. I love data. But most importantly, what I like is to actually then make it really useful and to be able to do something with it afterward.
Yeah, and some of the stuff you're doing with it is like bringing it right into the Congress, right? I think just yesterday you were briefing 10 or more senators on these findings. We've had meetings with House leadership. We're taking these findings. We're thinking through what they mean in terms of how to talk about these issues, and then equipping members of Congress to actually use them to do better.
That's exactly right, Alex. Yeah, I mean, yesterday I was with 10 different senators, and it really ran the ideological gamut from, Senator Warren to folks like Senator Shaheen, who often who really agree on the issues around like calling out corruption, making sure we're calling out the harms to everyday Americans. And we were just digging in to how to actually message this to the American people, especially in light of all of Trump's chaos and division that he is sowing every single day. And yesterday was no different.
Seriously, every day.
There's not enough wine in the world, I'm telling you.
Okay, without further ado, why don't we give our audience a window into what it's like to be a member of Congress getting a briefing from the great Tiffany Muller to take these learnings and apply them. All right, let's dig in. We've got just a handful of slides to walk through to help. And these we did, right around Christmas time, a little after Christmas. So things have shifted a little bit already. Trump's popularity has gone meaningfully down as this terrifying agenda has been unleashed. But one of the things we'll see is, as you'll break down, Trump came into this administration pretty popular.
That's right. Well, first, let's start with just where people are at in terms of how they're feeling about the direction of our country. And frankly, Alex, it's pretty bleak, right? And it's across party lines. Democrats, independents, Republicans, about 80% of voters think the country's going on the wrong track. And so that immediately screams that people want change. They want reform. They want things to feel different. So 78% of Americans said wrong track, 22% right track.
Can't say I disagree.
Yeah, exactly, right? And then to your point, and I think this is a really important point, Trump really came into office at the highest rates he's ever had. Like, first of all, even with his favorability, he was just barely underwater. 51% said he was unfavorable. 47% rated him favorably. But when you look at his job approval, what that means is, how did people think he did the last time he was president? Did he do a good job? And you can see there that he had the highest ratings I've ever seen. 52% said he did a good job as president. 48% said he did a bad job. And I'll just point out one critical subgroup: these independent voters who really do help swing elections in our country. They rated him much more unfavorable than they gave him with his job approval. So they said his job approval, 47% approve, 53% disapprove, but favorability, they don't like him as much. For 39%, only 39% rated him favorably. So they're willing to say, I don't like him, but I think he did a good job. And that was part of the problem in the election, Alex.
Yeah. And we've been reading Harry Potter with the kids, and it feels like the memory charm seems to have been cast upon the entire American populace. They forget the bleach.
I love that one. We are on book 3, and I think it's book 2. It's book 2 or book 3 where the professor's constantly doing the memory charm, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Now, look, this is your slide, Alex. You should talk about this one. The Supreme Court is underwater, not as much as it should be for who it is, but you can see here 47% of voters said that they don't approve of the Supreme Court. You can see Clarence Thomas really underwater. Only 25% of voters said he's doing a good job. But when you go over here to the right, you can see CEOs and billionaires really, really underwater, right? Billionaires have a 56% unfavorable to only 19% favorable rating. And Alex, you and I have done some research in the past. We've seen this Supreme Court number continue to tick down as people lose faith in it.
It's going down, and this is the branch that historically has had easily the highest approval ratings. People separated from politics, and I think a big part of what we're trying to do in communicating about the corrupting influences by the very billionaires and CEOs and theocrats, sort of encapsulated by the right side of that slide there, demonstrate and show the connections between those interests and these justices, and how the court has been weaponized against them. And yes, indeed, we've seen these favorability ratings go down. I think there's still a lot of work to do, as most Americans still don't really understand what the court does, what it's supposed to do, and how much it affects their lives as they rewrite the Constitution in the vision of those interests.
So the next thing we asked folks was, do they believe that government needs reform to work better for the American people, or do they think it's fundamentally broken and we need to start completely over? And look, again, at the beginning of this, I said almost 80% of voters think our country's on the wrong track. So everyone thinks that there needs to be some reform, but how broken do they think it is? And 2/3 think it needs reformed so it works better for the American people. But a full 1/3 of our voters believe that the government's so fundamentally broken that we need to start over. And I just want to point out, some key groups that actually over-indexed on this: young voters, Black voters, and Hispanic voters were far closer to 40% believe the government was so broken that we need to just completely start over. And that really screams for how our government, our country, has not been working for them for so long that they're just so frustrated. And I think Trump cynically tapped into that frustration. And so we saw him really pick up votes, especially with Hispanic voters. But we need to really pay attention to the fact that they are so dissatisfied with our government.
Yeah, and I think you can draw a straight line to the core focus of your work, Citizens United, and overturning it, stopping the billionaire bot government agenda, to that loss of faith, to those, I think very understandable feelings that the whole system is broken and is not working for people.
Well, so then we actually asked them just that. Who do they blame for government not working for them? And, one of the things that ranked the highest was actually government waste. The Republican talking points about all of this waste in our government really cuts through, because folks don't always know exactly what government does for them, right? So government waste was number one, but big corporations was number two. And it's because they feel like the scale is far too weighted to the big corporations, the big donors, the special interest. And then tied with big corporations was the elected officials themselves. And, I've seen this in our research over the years. Yes, they blame the people giving the big money, but you know who they blame even more? The people taking the big money. And so we have to really continue to communicate that, because elected officials don't always want to hear that feedback. Okay, so we also asked who voters trust more to take on really key issues. And I just pulled out a few to go over today. But one of the ones that I focus on all the time is, who do they trust more to take on corruption? Because too often voters think, pox on both your houses, you all are taking big money, you're all sold out. And, this research once again backed that up. That it was exactly even 50-50 whether they trusted Democrats or Republicans more to take on corruption. And with independent voters, they actually believed Republicans by 6 points. Republicans were better at taking on corruption. That is always mind-boggling to me, especially when we see the fact that there's this corrupt administration with all these big donors who have basically bought the regulatory agencies that oversee their for-profit companies. It's hard to imagine that voters don't see a difference. But it's clear we need to make sure that they understand the corruption that we're facing every single day.
And honestly, Tiffany, I think helping folks understand this stark reality that neither party has a clear advantage on corruption, and helping Democrats wake up to this from our perspective was a really important reason to engage in this research work in the first place, because it's not that surprising to me. Yeah. Even as to our eyes, and we're paying very close attention and following the news really closely and following the politics and seeing the influence that folks like Musk and other billionaires have on the Republican Party and the extent to which they're calling the shots. The Republican Party and MAGA, folks like Jim Jordan and Trump, have relentlessly hammered false narratives about corruption. And the Democrats have not been willing to embrace this as either a political issue or as a sort of a character or candidate or party defining issue to the extent they can, given the rampant corruption that we see ongoing.
Exactly. Now, one thing they do think about Republicans, they do think that they're going to use government for their own financial gain, and they do think that they serve the wealthy. So we do have a chance to change this narrative. And that's one of the things that we're always really focused on. And speaking of that, Americans actually do believe that Musk and DOGE are going to use DOGE to just line their own pockets, right? And that they actually trust experts in the federal government more to defend the government, to defend civil service, to make the right calls for the American people, versus folks like Musk, who has so many contracts in front of the government and who really is just banking on more contracts to line his own pocket. Okay, we have, I think, just one more slide after this one. We've talked a lot about DOGE. As you all know, this is the kind of fake agency that's been set up to identify government waste. And that starts really popular with voters. They want government waste to be cut. But for the most part, voters don't really know what they think about DOGE yet. So kind of initially, it's pretty split. You can see there 29% approve, 36% disapprove. So it's just not that many people have a strong opinion. But when they hear that it's going to cut government waste and it's going to find spending, they really like it. It goes up to 52% support. But then when we actually ran some negative messages against it about how folks like Musk were going to use it to line his own pockets or use it to go after key areas like Medicare or Social Security, you can see that drops back off and 49% of voters disapprove of it. So what this shows me is voters don't know what to think about it yet. So we have to be really assertive in making sure that they understand how this is all about lining Musk and other big donors' pockets and hurting the American people. And we can really win this narrative.
And here's where we saw this play out this week, right? With this completely reckless decision by the Office of Management and Budget, Russ Vought, who we've talked about on the channel, the Christian nationalist, Project 2025 architect, sweeping cuts to all federal aid that seem to immediately impact the very government services that you're talking about. Things like programs like Meals on Wheels didn't know if they could deliver meals that day. Medicaid portals down across the country, and so that's the duality, right? It's like the billionaires lining their pockets and the people on the other side of it suffering as a result. It's not about waste and fraud and abuse as they, very effectively message, as you're noting here. It's about them enriching themselves and the people suffering on the other side of that.
That's exactly right. And our strategic recommendations, last slide, and we'll pull them down in just 1 second so we can talk on the screen again, is that we have to connect these harms and connect this corruption to the harms that are facing everyday Americans. And that we can't just be the defender of the status quo. We also have to say how we're going to change the system to work better for the American people while calling out the fact that they're working for their donors every single day. And this week, I think, was a great example of that. They put a funding freeze in place. Meals on Wheels, preschool, energy payments, all of that thrown into chaos and hurting people while they were down at Trump's golf course, golfing and trying to cut taxes for the biggest corporations. It's such a clear contrast. And we can go ahead and pull these slides down. But yeah, that's the latest research, Alex.
Incredible. So helpful, Tiffany. I always love working on these things with you, and I need you there to do it because otherwise I have no idea how to even approach it because it takes real, expertise and knowledge about this process to be able to produce such important insights that we can then use. And we're really thrilled to have this opportunity to bring this type of information, which is kind of like people seek this stuff out, right? When you get fresh poll results, people really want to hear it, but to bring it to folks that are feeling like they need to be able to communicate to their communities, to their families, as we, enter this really perilous time. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me on. Can't wait to come back. We're in this together.
Meanwhile, don't forget to like and subscribe to Midas Touch Legal AF, Court Accountability. Check out Tiffany's incredible work, endcitizensunited.org. Is that right?
That's right.
And then follow us, of course, at courtaccountability.org and check out our Substack, Tilted Scales, Court Accountability on Substack. Thank you so much for staying with us, and see you next time.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.